All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is Tuesday, March 14th, 2023, 6:31 p.m., and you are at a Common Council of the City of Wausau meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. All right, the next item is roll call. Clerk Caitlin will make that.
We have 11 voting members present.
All right, thank you. And before we get to our presentation, because I think a lot of people are here to talk about item number 221109, that resolution from the Finance Committee, I have been asked by the Finance Committee Chair, and also it sounded like during the discussion that we would like to take a little bit more time with this. It's about approving carryover funding for $40,000 for the 2022 Scott Street Bridge fencing project. So if there's no opposition, I'm going to pull that from our agenda, and we can set up a tour. Sounds like that's what we wanted, and also have a more robust discussion. So if there's no opposition, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I think now we are ready for our presentation tonight. It's Wisconsin DNR PFAS Remediation and Redevelopment Program Educational Presentation. We have two fine folks from the DNR tonight. I will let you introduce yourself and take it away. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you for the invite. This will work. Advance. Okay,
it might
great.
be a little sneaky, but yeah.
It's right on. No problem at all. Go back to the beginning here. Oh. There. Perfect. Thank you. My name is Trevor Noble. I am the Field Operations Director at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for the Remediation and Redevelopment Program.
Good evening. I'm Steve Elmore. I'm the Program Director for the Bureau of Drinking Water and Groundwater at DNR. Thanks.
So what we've prepared this evening is we put together a very short PowerPoint presentation. It's around 7 or 8 slides, including contact information at the end, relying on a lot of verbal here, hoping to get questions as well, with the understanding that, we may not have all the answers tonight, but we're always willing to take questions to go and follow up as we need. So, okay, what we're going to provide tonight. So, very quick overview. We'll provide a PFAS 101. I know all of us are in a little bit different place in the understanding of what PFAS is. Go over roles and authority. Then discuss the cleanup process, both in general and specific to PFAS, and then some resources at the end of the presentation. Okay, what are PFAS? So PFAS, can you still hear me if I back up a little bit? Okay. So what are PFAS? So PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl alkyl substances, and that can be a mouthful. A lot of us have heard about it in the news, in movies and such. It's all around us essentially. But what that is, it's essentially a list of chemical contaminants. So PFAS itself isn't a specific individual contaminant, not a specific compound. It's actually a list of compounds. I've compared it in other public meetings to cookies or candy. There's a lot of different types of cookies that are under the category of cookies. It's kind of like in the contamination world, we talk about volatile organic compounds. That's not just one thing. That's benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, all of the chlorinated solvents. It's a list. So PFAS are multiple compounds. There's thousands of them. What this slide is showing, and we've used this in multiple presentations, is where PFAS is found. A lot of folks have a general understanding that it's in a lot of things. It's not hard to find it if you're going to do a simple Google search or follow the media on where PFAS is found. The slide is showing some products that may contain PFAS. Starts with contaminated drinking water. Obviously, one of our main focuses is we've started really navigating through PFAS at the Wisconsin DNR 4-ish years ago. So stain-resistant and carpet fabrics have been a contributing source and have contained PFAS compounds. Nonstick cookware, I know a lot of folks are well aware of the evolution of being able to get an egg out of a frying pan a lot easier for quite a while now. Firefighting foam, that's one of those that has been a very commonly understood source and something that had been required by the FAA to be able to accurately or efficiently fight airline fires or fuel fires. And then fast food packaging, getting that essentially that oil resistant coating, that oil resistant film. So it's in a number of other things. The slide doesn't cover a lot of the other consumer goods and other, detergents and or consumer products that we may use. But the point is that PFAS has been utilized quite a bit in the products that we use in the life that we live. Ooh, that time it worked. Oop. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. So this slide is a very simple PFAS water cycle slide, kind of like the PFAS cycle within the environment. I know it's maybe a little difficult for folks to see here, and this is not a Wisconsin DNR figure, not a Wisconsin DNR slide. This is actually from Michigan Eagle, and Michigan Eagle is essentially the Wisconsin, the DNR of Michigan. We do work with them quite a bit on cross state and cross-agency issues, but this is their slide, so we can't take credit. But essentially, this is showing how PFAS makes its way through our environment. And folks have if you take away PFAS, you're thinking about water cycle. Kind of a simple way to look at it as it works its way from an industrial site to a wastewater treatment plant, to sludge, to a landfill, and then back to the wastewater treatment plant as sludge. Just some just showing some of that that cyclic loop that chemical contaminants can have, and as it makes its way out for biosolids, infiltration, discharge via permit, and then obviously more agricultural related questions regarding uptake in plants. So a very general slide on the PFAS cycle. It's the same one. Okay. So roles and authority. So first and foremost, safeguard public drinking water. Something we've been focused on since we started taking on this PFAS effort. Protect groundwater and surface waters of the state. Take an emergency and or direct action to protect public health, safety, or welfare, or the environment if needed. Provide technical assistance when requested. And that's a question that we get quite frequently on what that level of technical assistance is. It can mean different things for different programs and different agencies based on their authority. But we're always open, as we are here and as we are every day, to what that technical assistance can look like. And ensure people responsible for contamination are following the applicable laws. Steve and I work for separate programs at the DNR, Steve being focused in on drinking water and groundwater, mine being the remediation and redevelopment program, where I would describe it as anything and everything contamination related: soil, sediment, groundwater, surface water, but a lot of overlap between the two programs as we work together on the PFAS subject or any other contaminant that impacts public or private drinking water systems. It's like a game, I swear. I try up and down.
It's a game for us to watch too.
Okay. Okay. So this slide I'm going to spend a little bit of time on, and if we need to go back to any of these slides, please feel free. So this is showing the WIS admin code, so Wisconsin Administrative Code in the NR 700 to 799 process. The remediation redevelopment team works within NR 700 primarily. It's essentially the Wisconsin Administrative Code that is really applied to the spills law. So WISDAT 292, cleaning up a hazardous substance discharge with the environment. That time I didn't touch it. Okay. So this is actually showing that process within NR 700, within how our program operates. And I think one main takeaway is this isn't just PFAS. This is the way the program has operated for a long time. This is your corner gas station site that has a leaky underground storage tank to the large industrial sites of the world moving through this NR 700 process. So it starts with discovery and reporting. There's a couple different avenues that we receive notice of contamination or notice of discharge. We have an emergency notification where we receive it through our 1-800 emergency spills hotline. And then we have a non-emergency discharge notification where that's kind of your, for an example, a phase 1 or phase 2 is being completed at a property. During a phase 2, they identify some contamination, some samples are collected. We will receive a non-emergency discharge. We receive an emergency discharge notification where there's the, for instance, a semi-truck rolls over or a fuel tanker goes over and it has a discharge. A couple different avenues for reporting. Next step, and this was just kind of inserted, is the immediate or interim action. And that can mean a heck of a lot of things. But essentially what you're doing is you have reported an event and you are evaluating what steps need to be taken. It might be, in the case of the rollover of the tanker truck, it might be boom the, boom any surface water, outfalls, boom the river, make sure you're getting in equipment to help, something like that, immediate or interim actions. Immediate or interim actions in the PFAS world can be not only additional sampling, but it can be also providing alternative sources of water as far as bottled water. And that has been one of those immediate and or interim actions that can be taken when a contaminant is identified within the environment. Something that does take and is very much an iterative process, which is NR 700, is site investigation. Site investigation is trying to identify the degree and extent of the contamination. So we are notified. There's an immediate, I suppose not always an immediate or interim action that needs to be taken. It really is based on site-specific variables. What is the discharge? What are the receptors in the area? But part of the process is site investigation. So if mitigating efforts have been taken, this can go in conjunction with site investigation, but site investigation is essentially stepping out to try to identify where has all of this contamination, where is this contamination impacted? So that can be anything from soil sampling to installing additional monitoring wells to sampling additional private wells. It can mean quite a few things, but site investigation centers around sediment, soil, groundwater, surface water, and even vapor intrusion. And the vapor intrusion isn't as big of an issue with PFAS. We deal with that a lot more with volatile organic compounds, but it's all part of that all-encompassing complete site investigation to make sure that it is following the process and is establishing a path to trying to define a cleanup goal out here. What is going to make it safe? So yes, there's contamination, there's discharges happen, but what are we going to do now to make it protective? Once you have a good understanding of your site, so what's going on there? You had a discharge, you've done some additional work, you will kind of understand the degree and extent. Well, now how are you going to clean it up? You may have done some of those immediate or interim actions to kind of stabilize the situation, but evaluating cleanup options. What makes the most sense for the type of discharge that you've had, and what are the available? It could be funds, it could be limitations on access, could be a lot of different, there could be multiple players. So selecting and implementing a cleanup is that next step. So evaluating what your options and then selecting that option. In R&R, we call it a remedial action options or remedial action planning. So site investigation is complete. Now we have that plan of how we're going to dig this or how we're going to clean this up. That can include digging up contamination. Like I said, I'm not just speaking specifically about PFAS, contamination in general. Could be digging out the contamination. Could be injecting something in the ground to help the biological activity break those compounds down faster. There can be multiple things that can be put into place. A pump and treat system could be put into place to remove some of that contamination, to filter it out before it goes back into the environment. And then the end game, the finish line here for our sites that are in NR 700 is closure. So that means where all of the obligations under law have been met and closure will be deemed. Continuing obligations, that means that maybe I should take one step back. Sites in Wisconsin can be closed with contamination in place. And with that said, that means that there has been a complete site investigation, there has been a remedial action that is taken, and then closure is granted with those continuing obligations, knowing that there are engineering controls in place to make those sites protective. That makes it efficient for not only the regulators, but the regulated community to make sure things can still move forward. Environmental activities can be rather costly, depending on what it is. But as long as those continuing obligations are applied to the property and any of those continuing obligations are abided by and communicated to the department, that's a big part of that redevelopment portion of the remediation and redevelopment program. Remediation and then that redevelopment component. So these sites can still have contamination, but they've essentially been deemed closed and those continuing obligations in place. Okay, so coordination and resources, and I'll speak a little general on this, and if Steve wants to help supplement or if we get any questions, please feel free. Coordination and resources. So two different, and folks may be aware of these, two different funding mechanisms here. So there is the bipartisan infrastructure law at the federal level, and then there's the state that has just recently been proposed by Governor Evers, the $106 million in proposed budget initiatives. To keep this very general, the federal funds, the bipartisan infrastructure law, are, at least for our team, our program, are shovel-ready type of projects. The state funds and these $106 million that are proposed can help to essentially bridge that gap between potentially getting these sites to that shovel-ready infrastructure. And there are a lot of other moving parts that go into how these funds are used, but the state funds being more focused in on trying to help getting after some of these sites, getting help to communities and other contaminated properties, with the thought that federal funding may potentially be able to come in and help when a project is potentially shovel-ready. So just very, very generally speaking, Steve, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that?
Not really, but maybe I can talk a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that significant investment is, as Trevor pointed out, really focused on shovel-ready projects. And the city of Wausau has already submitted an intent to apply for that money for the water treatment at the water utility. So that you're already engaged in. We appreciate that. There's specific money focused just to address emerging contaminants, which includes PFAS. And you're already on the ball. That's great. It was one of the first applications we got. So congratulations. And
We're a little anxious.
Yeah, we look forward to reviewing the plans and moving forward with that funding for the city of Wausau.
Thank you, Steve. Whoop. I failed this test.
No, it's okay.
Okay, and that wraps up the presentation in general. I mean, we are here for any question that the council may have. Our contact information is there. If you would like to follow up with us after, we'd be more than happy.
Okay, if there are any questions from the council, if you push your button, I can call on you. Anyone? Alder Dinney.
Thank you, Mayor. The city's been kicking around an idea of having a wastewater, or not a wastewater, stormwater utility to manage our stormwater runoff. Does that play a role in some of the slide you indicated, the cycle of the evolution of the flow of the PFAS? Are there things we can do in that regard to help mitigate the issue?
Can you try to answer that? Sure. That is actually a great question, and I think something that we can certainly take back to our runoff team, our surface water and or stormwater team. It hasn't, at least from my experiences working in PFAS for the last 3 to 4 years, hasn't come up much, to be honest. I think there are potential, well, maybe I'll back up and say, I don't know if there's been a lot of data, or at least data that I'm aware of, on, stormwater specific PFAS concentrations, or what maybe BMPs have been put into place or proposed to, reduce loading. I don't know. But that's something that I think, well, I'll certainly take back to the water quality team.
Certainly, wastewater, we've been testing wastewater, and we have it in wastewater, but that's likely either coming from the drinking water, in your case, or from activities in the home. As Trevor mentioned, there's a lot of PFAS in products in our home, and when we wash our coats that may have PFAS on them, some PFAS goes into the wastewater then. And so we've been starting to understand that better. There's testing. There's going to be testing incorporated into wastewater permits moving forward, and then of course drinking water, which you're familiar with. But stormwater, I'm not sure we know that much about it, but I think it will be something we're learning more about in the years to come.
Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question specifically about PFAS and groundwater standards. So in the absence of an established groundwater standard like with PFAS, that doesn't mean that polluters won't be or can't be held accountable. Is that correct? My understanding is, in the absence of a established groundwater standard, administrative code then gives the power for the responsible party to have to interface with DHS guidelines on what it considers protective. And is it the case then that DHS recommendations of 20 parts per trillion combined would generally be the metric or standard for groundwater in the absence of an established groundwater standard?
Do you want to take the drinking water? I can take the RR side. It's up to you.
I can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have established groundwater standards yet in NR 140. That's the administrative code where we establish groundwater standards. We're in the process now. We do have an open scope statement to establish groundwater standards for PFOA, PFOS, and two other PFAS. That process, we probably have another 2.5 years before we establish that. But you are correct. We do use the recommended groundwater standards from DHS as health-based guidelines to guide our work in a variety of ways. One way is when we advise homeowners that might find PFAS in a private well. And we don't regulate the water quality of private wells, but we use those numbers to provide health advice to homeowners. And maybe you can talk a little bit more.
No, and Steve, I think that's great from, like the drinking water and receptor side. From the RR side, when it's degree and extent of contamination, our program has been using, as Steve had mentioned, those DHS, and I can't speak for DHS, but we've been applying those DHS recommended standards as far as defining degree and extent of contamination at this time. As PFAS evolves and things change, we'll make sure that we follow the science and make sure we're communicating. But one thing that we do is we have frequently, my phrase is communicate early and often. I think a big part of communicating with a responsible party is to communicate early and often to have an understanding. There can be not only from a discharge, but from reducing potential loading in there, best management practices that can be put into place when you're talking about reducing PFAS compounds. So my team only works, in one lane or one realm, remediation, redevelopment. Steve works in drinking and groundwater. We have other programs, waste and materials management, surface water, but we all work very closely together to try to understand that. And that's what I think that stormwater question was a good one. It's something we haven't had before specific to stormwater. But I know I kind of deviated from the main question, but we have been using the DHS recommended standards at this time.
Thank you. And just one last question. So the city drinking water wells where elevated PFAS levels were found, like CW3 and CW6, those sit immediately adjacent to a Superfund site, of which the city of Wausau is a responsible party. So it's right next to an old chemical company. We've got an old city dump across the river, but my understanding is that plume actually goes under the river toward those city drinking water wells. And then you've got the old Marathon Electric property. So when you've got elevated PFAS levels next to a Superfund site that has an established monitoring well network to test for VOCs, why wouldn't the city of Wausau, since it has control of and access to those monitoring wells, why wouldn't it want to immediately test them for PFAS, the groundwater, so it can be assured that contamination is not migrating toward the drinking water wells?
So that's a great question. And in general, and we've discovered this a lot with PFAS, identifying a single source can be extremely difficult, or at least a single source or a single RP, because of all of the potential uses and sources, especially in a potential industrial area with quite the history. Using Wausau as an example, as you outlined, there's a lot going on, but there may not just be one source or one responsible party in some of our cases, and that can be very difficult to sort through on multiple levels, on what has been currently established, if there is a potential responsible party group, and where all of these potential plumes may overlap or where it may be commingled. So it's much more difficult identifying a single source and a single RP in some of these PFAS situations.
Thank you for the information.
Alder Gisselman.
Just carrying on with, thank you, just carrying on with that, but, I mean, there should be some effort to even identify some of those salts. I mean, Wausau had, granted, the treatment plant and all, but shouldn't we be, or the DNR, what's the DNR science with regard to at least projecting or going ahead with starting to find some of these sources? I mean, just by saying it's difficult, I hope the DNR just doesn't say that and then sort of give up on the project of trying to identify some of those sources that are clear, that may or may not be clearly evident within the neighborhood. Because I think, I'm not sure about Wausau, but I'm sure throughout Wisconsin there were some clearly evident sources that did damage to drinking water in a variety of sources in the state.
No, that's a great question, and there is an obligation under the law for responsible parties to define degree and extent of contamination. PFAS, as I had mentioned earlier, can be a difficult one because there can be potential overlapping sources, or potential multiple sources and multiple responsible parties. So it is the obligation for a responsible party, be it many or one, to hire a qualified environmental professional to make those determinations and then work, in collaboration or with DNR support to establish, well, we may have this issue, where do we go from here? Here's what we have, what does this mean? And that is essentially what we have been working with responsible parties on as they work through their site investigation to try to establish what is going on out here.
Alder Denny.
Thank you, Mayor. One more question related to Gary. So, we have the Wisconsin River runs right through the city. It probably changes which way the groundwater moves season to season, so it may be difficult to find that point source with testing, not knowing which way it's flowing, but we should be able to at least forensically figure out what those individuals are doing and create a group responsible. You might have determine a 10%. Do you determine a certain percentage if you have a small guy in a big company, or is there a way to parse that? If you determine a group is responsible, or do you hold them all equally responsible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And from my experiences, it would be equal. There are some historic and/or potential third-party agreements that can be made if there are some type of, but that's not something that the department, at least to my knowledge, has made the determination on. So, that's a good question.
Any other questions? I have a question. How does the announcement from the EPA kind of change how we're approaching PFAS specifically? They've just announced their proposal of 4 points per trillion. Is the safe level? Just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. So today, EPA announced that they announced a draft maximum contaminant level for drinking water set at 4 parts per trillion for PFOA, 4 parts per trillion for PFOS, and then 4 other PFAS have a hazard index approach, MCL, maximum contaminant level. So the short answer is nothing happens right away, right? Because this is a draft maximum contaminant level. This is a proposal. Now this kicks off a comment period, which we'll be looking at and potentially commenting on with our partners at the health department. And then I think it's late 2023 or early 2024, they'll have a final rule. And then my program will take that final rule and start a process to put that into state law. So do an administrative rule update process. And so this is a lot of process speak, but then something like 3 years later, we will have state law with that maximum contaminant level in it. So in the meantime, what's going on? Well, we already have a state maximum contaminant level for PFOA and PFOS. That's set at 70 parts per trillion, quite a bit higher than the draft number that they proposed today. So, but along with that, the maximum contaminant level we have now, we have required testing, which the city of Wausau takes part in. So does every other public water system. To the tune of 2,000 public water systems in Wisconsin are testing for PFAS this year for the first time. And we will have that data on our website. Anyone can look at it. We're also looking at it and determining what has to happen next. And so if they exceed 70 parts per trillion, we will make those systems either drill a new well or put on treatment to reduce exposure to people from PFAS from that drinking water. And then if it's a lower level, right now, if it exceeds what we call the hazard index, which is a combination of PFAS that, adding them up, if it exceeds 20 parts per trillion, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but from a simple concept, we're adding up the different concentrations of different PFAS in the water. If that exceeds 20, we say that exceeds the hazard index, and you have to public notice, you have to give that information to the water consumers, okay? It's been our experience that when the water system engages with the public in that way, the public wants to reduce those levels, right? And the community does too. I mean, that's a natural reaction. And so communities will be reducing likely the ones that do exceed, that hazard index will decide to reduce those levels on their own. And we also have resources available, as I mentioned earlier. We've got federal infrastructure money. We also have another pot of money for the next 2 years, $25 million in the state to address small and disadvantaged communities that have PFAS in their drinking water. So we have resources available right now. And so we're really working with communities to make that next step, put on treatment, drill new wells to reduce the exposure. Then fast forward, say 4 years from now, well, then we'll have a maximum contaminant level of 4 parts per trillion. And the fortunate thing is these 2,000 water systems in Wisconsin that are testing this year, probably in 2024 and 2025, we'll be working with them to install treatment. By the time we have this maximum contaminant level in place, if you do install treatment, you you can get down to just about zero PFAS, right? If that's maintained properly, that treatment system. And so by the time they test again under that new maximum contaminant level, they're likely to have zero PFAS or much lower PFAS. And if they already have treatment in place, it might be just optimizing that treatment in order to get down below that 4 parts per trillion.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, thank you for, Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Knowing that we talked a lot tonight about the drinking water side, on the wastewater side, I guess I have some looming concerns because I think that also is a critical source of how PFAS can enter natural waterways. I mean, we know that once we treat wastewater, we discharge it into the Wisconsin River. Most recently, we've seen some advisories for certain natural bodies of water about taking fish from those and how often people should or shouldn't consume those. Do you foresee additional regulation coming down on the testing of that treated wastewater discharge from systems statewide to try to mitigate the entry into those natural water bodies? And will that be, I guess, a separate process of treatment versus what we're doing to get clean drinking water for people to consume? But there also needs to be some control on what systems discharge into these waterways. Is that going to be a separate level of regulation? And are there methods that can be employed at that wastewater entry point to mitigate that discharge? Because I think all communities are probably guilty of it right now because it's emerging so quickly. We are all probably doing it.
Yeah, exactly. That's really important to reduce the source of PFAS, right? If we don't reduce that source of PFAS coming into the river, we're never going to get it out of the fish. We're never going to be able to eliminate those consumption advisories for fish, for instance. So last year when we passed a law requiring testing and reduction of PFAS in drinking water, at the same time a law was passed to reduce or to build PFAS into wastewater discharge permits. So so each of those wastewater facilities is permitted to discharge. And now, moving forward, when they go to renew their permit, they will have to address PFAS. They'll be written into their permit, and there'll be actually numerical levels that they have to meet on that discharge. So that is being addressed. It's a fairly long time frame, though, similar to what I talked about with drinking water. I think a permit's like maybe a 5-year permit, and so some of them might be in the middle of a permit, and then they'll come back to, it might be like 5 years from now before they renew their permit, for instance. So I'm not the director of the wastewater program, so I'm a little fuzzy on all this, but that's basically how it works. So they'll have to, in their next permit, they'll have to write it in there, and then there'll be measures they have to take to reduce PFAS in their discharge.
So it's reasonable to assume that communities statewide should expect that at some point in the near future that they're going to be required to reduce those levels, just like phosphorus and everything else, that,
Yep,
what you
absolutely. It's
put
just like
back into the
phosphorus. Yep.
system.
Yep.
Okay. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
All right. I'm not seeing any more questions. If everyone is set, thank you so much for making the trip, and thank you for making yourself available to us for the last year and
course.
beyond.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, we have pre-registered citizens for matters appearing on the agenda and other public comment. I have a whole stack here, so I'm going to start with Jean Abreu.
Hi, my name is Jean Abreu. I live at 1233 Jackson Street, and I'm here to speak in support of the greenhouse gas reduction resolution. Not only do I feel this is a fiscally and environmentally responsible next step for our community, but I think it's an important and hope-filled investment for our children. I speak as a teacher. This is my 42nd year in the classroom, and I'm currently working at EEA, a small middle school, high school charter school in the district. So last week, I discussed the resolution with my students in science class, and I asked them to write down anything they might want to say to you, the City Council, about the resolution. So I wanted to share those. They said, "Thank you for doing something positive. Thank you for giving us hope. Thank you for doing something that will have such a big impact. I'm proud of people taking charge and tackling this issue. Why hasn't anyone tried to do this before? Do you think other businesses will follow your lead? I think it's great. I hope it's not too late. We need to do this faster. And thank you for taking the necessary steps to create a cleaner earth for the next generation." But what I found most interesting was the students' desire to calculate how old they will be in 2050. Now, I will be 92, but the kids will be in their early to mid 40s. So think about that. Passing this resolution means that we are choosing to change the trajectory of their future, moving them towards a more clean and energy-independent world. And so for me, that is a big reason to support this resolution, and I thank you for voting on it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and thank your students for us. Next up, I have Bruce Grau.
Bruce Grau, 1115 North 10th Street. I want to ask a couple questions. If the previous vote of the council did not meet requirements to proceed with fencing off the space below the Scott Street Bridge, why does this project continue to proceed? If you're going to drive out the people who inhabit this space at their homes, what will you provide as new homes, as the law demands? If you feel police resources should be directed away from responding to complaints by downtown business owners about unhoused people encroaching upon their space, why would you disperse inhabitants living under this bridge to seek out more business spaces for shelter? Please step back and look at the ramifications of fencing out a congregate living site of our unhoused community members. Proceeding with this project raises questions of, one, integrity and trust of our democratic representative process of city government, violation of civil law as contested in many U.S. cities, and adherence to just plain old common sense and humanity. With ARPA funding and the support of community and businesses, you have the opportunity to avoid such negative outcomes. Table this fencing idea until you have come up with a plan to address the lack of immediate, safe, and supported housing options, such as construction of tiny home villages. Shelters and day programs don't substitute for housing first. Recent solutions aren't meeting the rising demand. If you're generally concerned about people falling into the river, construct a barrier along the water line. And if your heart goes out to the inhumane living conditions our unhoused citizens endure, you should take full advantage of this rare opportunity we have to provide proven, immediate, and long-term relief to this avoidable suffering. This is also an opportunity to promote public confidence in our city government, your appreciation of the law, and adherence to just plain old common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Joel Lewis.
Thank you very much. And I got to say, it's hard to follow Gene on this particular issue, but I'm here to speak about the greenhouse gas reduction resolution. And before I get started, I want to shout out the Sustainability, Energy, and Environment Committee. For those that don't know, this is mainly citizens that are a part of this committee and one alderperson. And if it weren't for this committee, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you very much to the people that are on that committee. I also want to thank the Public Health and Safety Committee, who pleasantly surprised me by unanimously voting to push this forward. I didn't see that coming, so I appreciate you all very much for that too. I I agree with the students that Gene quoted, right? At a very young age, my grandfather started to teach me the importance of how we were all interconnected to the other life forms around us, and how everything we do has an impact on those life forms. And I feel so happy that we might actually be doing something positive here in the city of Wausau that will impact future generations. It'll also potentially make the private sector think about their future, right? And not only will it save us money, but it can protect the environment, and it can also be a good source of creating jobs. I also have some paper copies of the petitions. I don't know if I got them emailed in time, but I have enough for everybody to have a copy, and I just hope that you vote yes on the greenhouse gas reduction resolution and keep the commitment to the development of a municipal energy plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is it okay if I bring these up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next up, I have Jay Coldwell.
Hi, I'm Jay Coldwell. I'm at 3422 Horseshoe Spring Road in Wausau. I want to speak in favor of the resolution to reduce greenhouse gases and provide energy security. The climate change is just such a difficult thing to get your arms around. It just creeps in like a shadow under the door, and it just is so slow. But really, exponential growth is something we humans just don't comprehend, and it will be here and so serious in my lifetime, which is not all that long. So the climate change is going to be a threat to all of the necessities of life, things that the city is concerned with: food, water, clean water, sanitation, shelter, energy. And those needs really have to be met by communities. They can't be met by individuals. The rugged individualist is not going to be able to go out and fend for themselves. The community has to do that. So it's so important that our community is a leader. This really can only be done in communities. And so please vote in favor of the resolution. It could be seen as a really foundational step for what is to come, which I'm sure will be even more challenging in the years ahead.
Thank you. Next up, I have William Harris.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to City Council and the Mayor. I'm here because I strongly am in favor of the resolution supporting the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and energy security, and respectfully request that the Common Council and the City of Wausau approve this measure. By committing to taking action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, what you are really saying with your vote is that you care about maintaining and improving the health and safety of our community and investing in our future. And our future has to include taking significant steps toward clean energy. If we want better air quality, to ensure environmental sustainability, economic security, our business interests, energy independence, we have to invest in clean energy. If we are serious about our commitments to environmental justice and investments in marginalized and diverse communities, we have to invest in clean energy. If we want to support our rural communities and ensure that they are resilient and able to adapt to climate change, we have to invest in clean energy. If we want to reduce energy costs and healthcare costs on our hardworking people in this community by reducing the burden on the tax levy, by reducing the burden of higher electricity costs, and by reducing the health risks such as respiratory disease caused by smog and air pollution, we have to invest in clean energy. Investing in upgrades and new cleaner technologies will create savings for this community. The future of manufacturing jobs across this country will be in clean energy and in creating a clean economy, and this community cannot be left behind. Doing things the way we have always done them just because it's comfortable is not sustainable, it's not practical, and it's certainly not healthy. The future is ahead of us, not behind us. So let's make the real investments we need to make now to ensure a brighter future and in the thriving Wausau community that we want to see tomorrow for generations to come. Please vote in favor of this resolution to support the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and energy security, and let's continue to move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Sandra Kelch.
Obviously, I'm here for the fencing project, which was pulled from the agenda, but I decided to speak so that when you do go visit, you can kind of keep some of this in mind. We've received multiple and conflicting reasons for this fence. One of them is safety, and I can 100% agree with one area where there's accessibility to the dam and it does pose a danger. However, that's where it begins and ends as far as the safety concern. More people have jumped off the Bridge Street Bridge than have just fallen into the river by the Scott Street Bridge. So if we want to truly look at safety and protecting our citizens, that should be included, the Bridge Street Bridge. Ms. Rasmussen has in the past spoken about the unhoused should not have to live the way they are living under there. We don't agree on a lot, but we do agree on that. However, the fencing project is not going to solve that problem. It's only going to create more of a hazard, more of deplorable living conditions, because where they are right now, they are surviving, and we don't have a place to put them to survive. We have lost numerous unhoused people, most recently an individual under a porch who died because of the elements, and that is my concern if we move these people. Chronic homelessness has to be looked at differently than homelessness in general. The chronically unhoused have special issues that are not effectively and successfully addressed in shelters. Most of them cannot stay in shelters because of mental illness, severe trauma, and addiction. And so we need to consider that when you're looking at replacing or putting those fences up and taking away the only shelter that they have right now. If we can just use those resources, that money, to be put into something that is more productive in focusing on long-term housing solutions with supportive case management, supportive services that are directed only to the chronically unhoused, I think we'll have more success than putting up a $100,000 fence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Amanda Ledecky.
Hi, I'm Amanda Ledecky with the Community Outreach Task Force. I'm the Outreach Director, and I decided to take a trip up my stairs and dislocate my shoulder. So I did not have the ability to write something, so bear with me tonight. I just wanted to bring up also with the fencing, when you do go down there, it's not going to be pretty. It's not. Nobody's going to like what they see. It's ridiculous. But now put yourself in that. These clients have been there since November in the same structures. That's a long time. You know, we're seeing the. We really need to understand that once the fencing goes up, it might not actually keep them out. If I was stuck on the streets and I had nowhere to go, and the only shelter I had was to go up and over a fence, I'd be jumping. So I don't think it's going to work as well if we don't have other options already set up to help them. You know, with $80,000, we can get another Tracy. And she does amazing work. That's case management. That's getting them off the street. That's getting them the help they do need, not just pulling out where they can't stay. Because honestly, I think they're going to be downtown. You're going to see them downtown if we start moving them from underneath that area, they're going to find other structures. And it's going to be business openings, and it's going to be in parks, and it's going to be in schools. They're going to be around not school playgrounds, I shouldn't say breaking in schools, but we're going to see them spread out. And then it's even harder for us agencies to reach them and to help them, because they, again, feel not heard and not seen. That's what we've noticed, is when there is pushback. And I know that is not the intent of anybody up here. Nobody's trying to push them out of here, but that is the way they feel. So I guess if you guys have any questions, also, come to the bus. Our clients have, I know, talked to Tom and a bunch of other people who have stopped down. They'll let you know. So, bus is open on Wednesday and Friday, 11 to 2. But yeah, I guess just look, I get why they want the fence. But we have to come up with another solution, or it's just putting the problem in somebody else's back door. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Sarah Mua.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mua. I am a manager at Denmark Tavern and also part owner of Mua's Callan Street Pub, which we just took over this last summer. I'm here on behalf of Abed for getting his bartender's license. I've known Abed for a long time. Before offering him a bartender's position, this man belongs behind the bar. He is a staple for our businesses. We were struggling when we first took over Callan Street Pub, and this man has brought in so much business for us. He is taking the steps to make the community a better place. He's watching out for his customers. He is getting involved with PTO, which not a lot of men do. He is a model employee at both of the establishments that I have him at. I just lost where I was going. Oh, no. Anyways, we closely monitor all of our bartenders through cameras. We have over 16 cameras at each establishment that we are able to monitor our bartenders through. We are also there multiple times throughout the day or monitoring them at night, just being there. We train them for all types of situations, letting them know what is acceptable, what isn't. I have witnessed this man be an exceptional person. He has not had anything on his record for 5 to 10 years, and I feel like holding something over somebody's head for that long is preventing them from becoming, a better person, especially when they are trying to do that. So I definitely think that you guys should give him a chance, and if he does, for some reason, fail in the next year, then we can go over it, or you can deny him next year for his license. But I do definitely think that he deserves a chance. And I know that the owners of Denmark will also back me on that, along with all the other 3 owners of Callan Street Pub, because otherwise we would not have him be a bartender in our establishments. And neither one of our establishments have had any trouble with Wausau PD, the city, or anything. We are always willing to do whatever each place is asking of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then last, I have Abdul Rahman. You might have to help me with your last name.
Sugair.
Sugair.
Or you go with Abed Sugair.
Okay.
So I don't know what else I got after what she just said, but thank you, Sarah. So I was here about 3 weeks ago for the same exact matter, and I got denied from my operator's license. I'm here again because I refuse to give up. I was asked, what have I done to rehabilitate at the time, and I wasn't ready to respond but my answer is similar. I completed all the steps to responsibly pay for my mistakes and the consequences of them. I got my license back and I completed all the necessary steps. I've worked the last 5 years at becoming a better person and an asset to the community. I'm really hoping that you would reconsider giving me my operator's license. I've also brought my boss, which you guys have already met. Please reconsider me. I am a good person and feel that I deserve a chance.
Thank you. All right, that is all I have for pre-registered public comment. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, and that's file number 230201 through file number 100211. I would entertain that motion. I have a motion from Alder Rasmussen and a second by Alder Herbst. Is there any discussion? Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you think we should pull item 23-0108 then and discuss what was just discussed about the license?
That is the will of this body. Is that what you're requesting?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I will pull that and we can discuss it separately. Yes, 230108. All right, is there any other discussion? Okay.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, next we'll vote on the item we just pulled. It's file number 230108. It is a resolution from the Public Health and Safety Committee approving or denying various licenses as indicated. I would entertain a motion. Oh, just kidding. Okay, if there's somebody, I have a motion by Alder Larson and a second by Alder Henke. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. We do vet these licenses in committee, and the committee has actually undergone training for how to manage the process that needs to happen by state statute for approval or denial of these licenses. One of those processes is a set process for how applicants that are recommended for denial can submit evidence of rehabilitation to be considered prior to the item appearing in the Public Health and Safety Committee. That's why the committee asked him if he had submitted such evidence. He had not. Obviously, he has the opportunity to do that, but absent that process being completed, the council should certainly not approve that license. So if your desire is that we consider this applicant again in the committee, I would ask that you refer that one particular applicant back to Public Health and Safety so that he can go through that process, submit the evidence that needs to be submitted, have it reviewed, have the recommendation reviewed, and we could consider that either this month or next month. The committee meets the third Monday, so that meeting is coming up. But with a refer back, we could put it back on that agenda.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, from what Alder Rasmussen just stated, I believe that if the individual would like to submit that information at a future meeting, that sounds like it would be appropriate and an opportunity to provide, I think, the documentation that's being sought. And I don't know what the Public Health and Safety Committee will ultimately decide, but I think that would provide the citizen with an opportunity to do so, and that's certainly something I'd be supportive of.
Okay, so I'm going to maybe interpret what you've said is that you'd like to make an amendment to refer back Mr. Sugayer to the Public Health and Safety Committee.
Correct, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, so I have an amendment.
Can you press your amend button, please?
Is there anybody that would like to second that amendment? It looks like we have a second by Alder Larson. Alder Denny, would you like to speak on the amendment? Or would you like to wait until we vote on?
Well, I would have preferred we discussed it here because one of the criteria is support by the employer, and I think he's demonstrated that. But if we're talking about a short delay to look at it more closely, I'm okay with that.
Okay. I saw somebody requested to speak and then didn't anymore, so if you'd like, Alder Henke.
Thank you. It was me. Yeah, we just, I'm part of Public Health and Safety, and we need some paper documents just showing how you've been rehabilitated and the steps you've gone through. We just need some physical evidence, just so you know what we're looking for from our side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you, and just a process note, that meeting is Monday. So it would be a good idea to get that stuff submitted through the clerk's office by the end of this week. Those packets go out on Friday. That said, though, just to clarify what we're voting on here, that we're voting on approving or denying everyone else in the batch, with the exception of the referral for Mr. Sugair. Is that?
Yeah, I kind of accepted this as an amendment to refer Mr. Sugair back to committee, and then we can vote on the
rest of the
recommendations
batch?
as
Okay.
amended. if
Okay,
that's-
thanks, yep.
All right. Is there anyone else that would like to, Mr. Gisselman, Alder Gisselman?
Yes, thank you. I think the city council would like, as these appeals come before the city council, to know those documents, what the procedure is. I think that may be something fairly recent with regard to some past people coming up and appealing the decision. So I think we just need to have a little education session with regard to what those procedures are, so that we know what those are when this happens again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm taking note, but I'm also noting that Alder Rasmussen probably has a response to.
I do have just a response. The training was conducted in the Public Health and Safety Committee, but it was certainly open to all of us. But that said, I think what we can do, because the city attorney's office conducted that training for us, we can locate the evening that took place and forward that meeting video out to everyone so that you can watch the training that we received from Nate Miller. And that helps then discuss specifically what happens and what they need to send in, so. And then what we can and can't consider was also gone over as far as exempt offenses, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Right, we are voting on the amendment, and that is to refer Mr. Sugair back to committee.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, thank you. And now we are on to this resolution as amended. Alder Watson.
And I just had a question. I know there was some discussion about reevaluating the process, especially for ones that aren't in a bar. Like, for example, the first denial, the quick trip. Has there been any other further discussion at the committee level?
I'm going to allow Alder Rasmussen to respond.
Thank you. So, yes, but not yet. And so what happened is that when this became a struggle for us, Alder McElhaney had some discussion with one of our state legislators, and she specifically asked him to consider down in Madison one of two things. Either allowing us as a municipality to place restrictions on the server license to make it retail only, which would prevent a person from tending bar but allow them to work in a retail environment, or to create a second type of server license that is retail only versus a full bartender. And that movement does have some legs down there, and we're expecting legislative action. But when she asked them, they were in the middle of being out of session for an extended period of time. But it does appear that is going to be considered and that there's some support for it. So not yet, but yes.
Any further discussion? Alder Denny.
Sorry, one last little thought on this, Mayor. We've run into a similar issue with recently property owners not being completely prepared when they come in. So I know everybody has an opportunity to, and not everybody is versed in public speaking to a panel like this. So I don't know if we should be looking at ways to better communicate how people should, or what they can do to represent themselves in front of this committee. But it's something we should consider. So residents are in their best position to defend themselves.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote on the resolution as amended.
You may begin voting. Motion passes as amended 11-0.
All right, thank you very much. Next up, we do not have any mayor's appointments, so we'll move on to item number 060909. It's a resolution from the Capital Improvement and Street Maintenance Committee approving the lease with the Lamar Companies for billboard signs at Bridge Street and 3rd Street. It looks like I have a motion from Alder Gisselman and a second by Alder Larson. Is there any discussion? Oh, just kidding. It was a motion by Alder Rasmussen and an second by Alder Henke. Mr. Gisselman, Alder Gisselman. unless you were trying to motion. You're good? Okay. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was the sole no vote against this. I am one that I am going to stick with the staff recommendation. I think that this billboard is unsightly in the neighborhood, and with the internet and TV and radio and stuff nowadays, I think the billboards in the city have reached their prime, and they should be on their way out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Alder Watson.
Also, in reviewing this, I thought we were going to, because we did want to potentially have it open for developers, right? And potentially buying that parcel. I didn't see like a for sale or contact Wausau, the development, economic development office to purchase this if you're interested. But I did see that Wausau, celebration sign. So is there a way to like put the for sale or have that notice on there?
I'm guessing that since the lease was with Lamar's, that we wouldn't have put it up for sale, but I'm assuming if we declined the lease.
Well, it isn't for sale, but there is a provision in the lease that provides that we can terminate the lease, and that's one reason for that, is if it's needed for future development.
Okay.
But it's my understanding we don't have any development on the table right now for that parcel.
And I guess I was just remembering conversation when we had, that we would still have it out there as being out open, like how we had the sign for the West Side Battery. Something out, like if you're interested in developing this, contact us. It's not a for sale, but, because do people know that that's available for development? That's my question.
I think that probably happened pre-Director Brodick, but she looks to be interested in giving some feedback here. Welcome.
No, we don't have a sign out there right now, obviously. We actually, we can move that. That's our office that kind of works with DPW to move that sign, so we are able to do that if that's the desire.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Part of the reason I think that we should support this is that there's not an immediate plan for the site. There is a overarching plan for that area that is incrementally, step by step, starting to come to fruition. But the lease is worded such that we can make a quick exit if we need to. And in the meantime, until that happens, we make some revenue off the site. The planning department has been interested in getting rid of this billboard for some time. This is the second or third time that I've seen this come to us on the council, and I think Gary probably has too. And so, but the fact that we can make that quick exit if we have a project is what enables us to at least get some revenue out of the site in the meantime and really fill both things. Because the last time we talked about getting rid of it, there was robust response from businesses in the community that advertise on it, that use it, and that would like to see it continue. And it's not unsightly. They've done some work on it. It, I believe, complies with dark sky standards for the lighting. So, it is what it is, but it's not there forever, and if something comes along, we have options. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 9-2.
All right. Thank you very much. We are now on to item number 230304. It's another resolution, or an ordinance actually, from the Capital Improvement and Street Maintenance Committee. Just kidding. Amending the ordinance section 12.20.080. It's access management on Grand Avenue. This did fail at committee, but it looks like I have a motion by Alder Lukens and a second by Alder Watson. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This came to the SISM Committee. This is in case people want to know. It's the small strip mall on Grand Avenue where Firestone Tire is and General Dollar is there. Evidently, somebody had just bought this property and they came to us with a request to put a driveway in off of Grand Avenue. And after a discussion, we decided against it because of safety. We felt that if we put a driveway entrance there, it would also be used as an exit to get to Eau Claire Boulevard and stuff, and it would be something that would not be policeable. And with the 2 to 3 driveways that are accessible to this property off of Kent Street, we thought that it would be a good idea not to let this go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I agree with Alder Larson. In this situation, it was determined that the site in question has 3 points of access off of Kent Street, which has been sufficient. And at the location where the driveway was requested, it's very simple for the motorist to just go around the corner and make entry into the property. There is, as he said, no way to control people that would exit. Even if you tried to mark it as right-in entry only, you can't control the folks that are going to try to hop across because there is no non-mountable median opposite the area they were asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Martins.
Thank you. I'm going to be supporting this this resolution. I think, or ordinance, I believe that this access management plan needs to be revised and revisited. It was put into place in 1996, and traffic numbers have decreased along Grand Avenue since that date. And the development of that area has changed since that point in time, too. The big shopping centers, Kmart and the grocery store are long gone. And it's now, with the exception of that small strip mall, that's mostly all apartments along there. And I think that it can be designed so that people driving north onto Grand Avenue can use it as an entry point, but it will be discouraging for people to try to exit from that point. So I'm going to be in support of this.
Okay, thank you. Alder Denny.
Thank you, Mayor. I was the sole vote for this in the SISM committee, largely for the same thing that Mike mentions. And I did go over there and look at it. With the snow we have, it is a little difficult to really judge right now how viable that is. But I still feel this is an undue restriction on that business. And I think we should look at a way to help them out.
Thank you. Alder Lukens.
So this is in my neighborhood, and I'm of course not on the committee that it came before this, but as I was reading it and thinking about it, because I frequent that area all the time, so I'm just going to be really honest. I think that if there was access, that I probably would be one of those people that would be using it as an exit too. But for convenience, I like the fact that it's going to be developed, and I understand the want, from the owners, but that's just not a very long strip, I guess, is what would be my concern. There are the apartments, and there aren't that many streets there. So to me, I guess I would be worried about safety somewhat, and just knowing, like I said, because it would be really convenient. If it were me, I'm just going to be honest, I would probably go out there because it's quicker. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I think we're ready to vote.
You may begin voting. Motion fails 3-8.
All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda is item number 230305. It's another ordinance from the Capital Improvement and Street Maintenance Committee, amending section 10.20.080A, designating no parking on the east side of North 2nd Avenue between Eldred Street and Strobridge Street. Looks like I have a motion by Alder Henke and a second by Alder Rasmussen. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I can't emphasize enough that this parking restriction needs to happen. Just this weekend, again, with the 10-inch snowfall, there was half a dozen cars parked in this exact same configuration that the committee considered and determined to be problematic. So hopefully we'll all support this, and they can get those signs up on one side and get things taken care of so we can at least plow through there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, thank you. Next item is file number 200410. It's a resolution from the Economic Development Committee approving the First Amendment to the development agreement with RJ Elm Properties LLC at 1520 Elm Street. Looks like I have a motion by Alder Henke and a second by Alder Watson. Is there any discussion? Oh.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11 to 0.
Thank you very much. We are on to file number 221109. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving and adopting the budget for Public Works West Street Garage Design Services Amendment 5. Looks like I have a motion from Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one inclusion in the scope of work. On page, I believe it's 95 of the PDF, it lists incorporation of, quote, economic development and land use compatibility. And on the quote-unquote economic development side, I was at the SISM committee. I believe this went through, and I recall, and I'm eager to hear what the chair SISM members have to state about their recollections. But yeah, I don't remember any economic development assessment component being done by Barrientos, and I think at this phase from this service provider, it's probably not an appropriate inclusion. This is to do a certain percentage of the design, and we're looking primarily at other things, not economic development. And we had a very productive discussion at HR last night about making sure that things went through the proper logical committee. So when you're discussing economic development, one might think that it would go to the Economic Development Committee. So I have several concerns about this inclusion, and I don't know if it requires an amendment to strike that language, but I'd also have a question if there's a Barrientos rep here tonight, and if not, I could ask Mr. Lindman.
Sure.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, Mr. Lindman. Just a couple of questions here. So on the economic development component, I have a few kind of concerns about this. Now, Barrientos had simultaneously worked for Marathon County government for much of the process that the fleet facility was being studied. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know the terms of his agreement with the county, but he does have a contract with the county.
Great. Yeah, when I spoke with him, I believe he said, you know, I worked with the county on their study. So my understanding, and if he's not here to confirm it again, I think it would be unnecessary anyway. But yeah, apparently that they were a consultant for Marathon County government. And the reason I think that we're getting into some important territory is because, well, this consulting firm was wearing both hats, one for the city of Wausau and one for Marathon County government. Those lanes may start to converge in a way that presents, you know, whether through appearance or reality, a potential conflict of interest. And one of those conflicts would be when we get into economic development assessment. And one reason for that is the county has, as I think we all know, a West Side master plan by Marathon Park, where it gives numerous suggestions on what we should do with properties, and one of the streets in that plan is West Street. So I think just on its face, so we can avoid potential conflicts of interest that I'd certainly scrutinize more formally at a later date if this stays in. I think we need to strike that. And I think it needs to be clear for the council that because this consultant was wearing two hats, one for the county and one for City of Wausau, that if in the unlikely event this work should ever even get close to the interests of the other employer client, Marathon County, we need to be notified of that as a council to make sure that the City of Wausau is being put first in this relationship. But I think one, I'll just recommend we strike that language about economic development, but then for the record, when it talks about land use compatibility in this study, historically, when Barrientos had evaluated sites in that context, it had looked at zoning and things of that nature. For the record, what is the zoning of this property currently?
Yeah, it's industrial, but I couldn't tell you specifically if it's medium, heavy right now. I'm not sure, Tom.
It's industrial.
It is.
Yeah. What will be the zoning for a fleet facility?
It will have to maintain industrial.
Oh, so we've got perfect sync there. So that's great. So what I'd like to recommend is that we strike the economic development language and just make sure that land use compatibility doesn't get funky, and that this assessment is consistent with the past practices of the prior study or study periods where it's looking appropriately at zoning and nothing too surprising. I guess that would be my concern. Thank you.
I guess the scope of services really is to get to 30% design on that property. So that's what the scope of services is.
Thank you. On that note, who provided direction then for Barrientos to include economic development compatibility?
I can't speak to his language, Tom, on, I don't know specifically why he used that terminology or what his thought process was, what his definition of economic development is. Redevelopment of the site, I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Lindman. So as Mr. Lindman states, I guess the goal is to get to this design level. So if we can keep the language consistent with that, I think we'll be staying out of some troublesome territory in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Alder Killian was at the same CISA meeting that I was at, and his recollection is correct. I don't recall any discussion of economic development compatibility. Our discussion was on feasibility and due diligence surrounding the environmentals of the site, both of which we asked for, and we asked for in parallel with that, that they proceed to the 30% design level so that this project can move forward sooner than later. And we were specific, at least I was specific about the fact that I really didn't care that the county had some vision for that property that may not dovetail with ours. Our goal, I believe, as an entity to get what we need for our employees is that if the environmental due diligence and the feasibility turns out okay, we absolutely want to acquire that property, whether they have a vision or not. And that property, acquisition of that property, the zoning fits, and it essentially takes 1300 Cleveland off the table, which was already off the table, but it eliminates any concerns from that neighborhood that we're coming back or we would ever come back. And so the idea that we would put this on a site where it is feasible to put it, the early renderings appear that it absolutely is. I don't think we need any environmental or any economic development analysis because we aren't engaging in any economic development. We're buying it in the public's interest for a public facility. And so I would make the motion to amend this to remove any reference in the agreement to economic development analysis.
Okay, so I think you're going to be asked to push your amend button.
Done.
But we're looking at item N in section 6 to remove that economic development and land use compatibility verbiage. The clerk is asking me to clarify, are we just talking about economic development or are we also removing land use compatibility?
Both.
Okay, we are asking to just remove item N. All right, it looks like we have an amendment and a second by Alder Killian. Is there any further discussion on that amendment? Okay, once we get it typed in, we'll vote on the amendment. Sorry, once the clerk has it typed in, because I'm not typing anything. She's doing all this work. All right.
Okay, ready to vote?
Yes.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-1.
All right, thank you very much. Now we are on the item as amended. I did see Alder Larson, you had your button pushed. Did you want to speak before?
Alder Rasmussen answered, got
okay.
it for me, so.
All right, Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Alder Rasmussen had brought something up, and I know I've received some commentary from the city attorney on the topic, and that was, I just wanted to make sure that if this went forward, this does not override or neutralize any prior action by the council in terms of properties that may or may not be included. For example, there was a vote perhaps a year ago that removed Cleveland Avenue from any study or assessment. I just wanted to make sure that putting something like this on the table would not reintroduce any more analysis of a property that was formally removed to begin with due to council vote and action. Thank you.
I might allow the city attorney to address that.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to me, unless somebody disagrees with me. I don't think this is talking at all about reintroducing 1300 Cleveland Avenue.
Thank you. And I was not referring to this reintroducing 1300 Cleveland. I just didn't want to see history of other contracts and votes kind of being neutralized. So in my understanding, yeah, we shouldn't be seeing the address 1300 Cleveland Avenue in future documents for this study or any other with the fleet facility is my current understanding.
That's correct.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I guess my intention was that if the residents in the area that were concerned about the other sites would see us moving forward on a completely different site, it would offer them at least some calm and some assurance that we've moved on. And it really has nothing to do with reactivating any of the talk about that site, but, you know, we're going in a different direction, and I think going to 30% design plans is a good path to getting to that point.
Thank you. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you to the Finance Committee for moving this forward. I think this is something that needs to continue to move forward. I know the employees from the Department of Public Works, I've talked with a few of them. Not only is this important for employee retention, but it doesn't matter if this takes a year or 5 years. The feedback I've gotten, so long as we keep moving forward, we're going in the right direction. And I would like to say thank you to the Finance Company for moving this forward, the Finance Committee for moving this forward.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I think we're ready to vote on the resolution as amended.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 221109A. It is a resolution approving and adopting the budget for American Rescue Plan Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund funded projects lead service line replacement. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. Is there any discussion? Alder Larson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Should this go through, where would we start?
Maybe.
So this would actually, we would be using this funding on our street reconstruction projects for this year. So it would be Henrietta Street, 10th Avenue, a block of Grant Street, yes.
So then it's kind of, I guess to me, it would look like it's kind of misrepresenting itself because it says for replacement of lead lines, not street reconstruction.
No, it is. It's for replacing the private side lead service lines along those street reconstruction projects within those areas of construction.
Thank you.
Yep.
So maybe I can just clarify a little bit. In the past, we've used DNR funds to offer grants to the private resident owners so that they could replace their side. And so this time, we're using ARPA funding instead.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
All right, thank you. All right, next up is file number 221109B. It's another resolution from the Finance Committee approving and adopting the budget amendment for American Rescue Plan Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund funded projects, year-round warming center, Catholic Charities, and Open Door. Looks like I have a motion from Alder Watson and a second by Alder Rasmussen. And maybe before I call on the folks ready to speak, our finance director would like to say something.
Sure. So there were two contracts attached, the subrecipient agreements. Catholic Charities had a period of performance January 1 through January 1 of 2023 through December 31 of 2024. Open Doors was March 1 of 2023 through December 31 of 2024. Open Door asked, they do have incurred a few costs in the month of February to, I guess, initiate the program, and they would like those to be eligible for reimbursement. They're not payroll related, they're just a few supplies and things, but with that March 1st date. So they were wondering if we could move that agreement to parallel what Catholic Charities had, just to make it easy. There were two sub-agreements attached. One was with Catholic Charities, and that's where the period of performance is contained. And the other one is with Open Door. It's page 2 of the agreement. And like I mentioned, there's two agreements, one for Catholic Charities and the other one is for Open Door. And so the Open Door one has the later start date of March 1.
So would I be accepting an amendment just to change that date to January 1 for Open Door?
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's somebody that wants to push their
And
amendment.
they do submit documentation on the expenses, so they would be, subject to review.
It looks like Alder Watson has pressed her amendment button. I'm going to assume that is the amendment you wish to move forward with, just making that date January 1. Okay, well, we have an amendment first, right? Yeah. And then it looks like, is the second from, do I have a second? From Alder Dinney. Okay. Now I have two requests to speak. I'm assuming you wanted to speak on the actual resolution, but if you'd like to speak on the amendment, I welcome that as well. Otherwise, we'll just get this taken care of and then we can.
Either way, my comments are relevant to either one,
Okay,
so.
well, okay, we can just maybe vote on this quickly and then have another robust discussion.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
Alrighty. I did see, I think, Alder Rasmussen and Alder McElhaney, so
Yes.
I'm going to call on Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I hope that we will all support this. This will actually allow the day center to take flight. And so as a collaboration between Catholic Charities and Open Door, we believe that this represents a good mix of an experienced provider that's providing services to our unhoused population, but also with an entity that has done it in the past and has a facility and a group of volunteers that are capable of providing the service when it's necessary. And so the extra funding that we approved in finance really was to allow Catholic Charities to assist Open Door, because as a subrecipient of federal dollars that require robust accountability and reporting, Catholic Charities has an area of expertise in that, from managing those larger funds and larger amounts with totally different accountability than what Open Door has. And so the two of them working together, I think, will get us not only measurable results, but good reporting and good management, and that will allow our day center to finally get moving and show some impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder McElhaney, did you want to speak?
Yes, I would like to make a request. We are putting in quite a few dollars, and I think the public is unaware of the dollars we've put in. I think that we've seen that over and over, that we're not doing anything, and I think this council has been pretty active in this area. I would like to get some updates, I guess Public Health and Safety, if the chair would allow, with Open Door and Catholic Charities. We've given them quite a bit of money, and I think that we need, if it's quarterly reports or whatever, about with day programming for Open Doors. I'd like to hear how many people have they had served? How many people did they connect to services? Close to what we get with Tracy every month. I wouldn't ask them to do this every month, but I think that it is not, I don't think it's asking too much to have at least every other month, every 3 months, quarterly reports, whatever, report about how they're delivering services and the successes they have. I think it's important that this is public facing and not put into a report. A report is fine, but also public facing, so members of the committee or council who choose to attend are able to ask questions. I think with this many public dollars, we need public facing discussions frequently. So that is my request. Thank you.
Okay, I do see we have representatives from Open Door and Catholic Charities here. If you want to speak or if you want to nod, tag team it.
Yeah, my name is Roberto Partero. I'm the Executive Director of Catholic Charities. We have no problem in reporting. We do that anyways. You know, we do it monthly for ourselves. We keep track on a daily basis of the people we serve and the funds that we provide. So we don't have any problem. We do that everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm Bob Grady. I'm the program director, and I can give you last year's figures. We served 578 unduplicated guests at our facility for a total of over 8,000 visits throughout that period. And we are actually, so far this year, are looking at probably closer to 10 to 11,000 visits with the expanded hours, and probably a similar number of unduplicated guests, somewhere between, say, 575 and 700 is what we're anticipating.
I want to personally thank you. I was involved in that, the Christmas, the weather situation, and I want to personally thank Open Doors. They stood up, they raised their hand, and they said, we're here to help. So thank you. You're a great asset to our community.
Thank you. All right, Alder Lukens.
Thank you. I would like to, I guess I echo what Alder Rasmussen said, and I also echo what Alder McElhaney just said, as far as I think that we are contributing quite a bit of funding for this, so therefore it is important to us as a council, and I think it would be good for the public to know. So I think that those reports like that would be really helpful, because maybe that information then could get out to the public more, so that people can see that, you know, we do value it. And I also thank you too for everything you're doing with Open Door. I know it's such an important service. It's not easy. And I'm not speaking personally because I don't do it like you do every day. And so really, very sincerely, thank you so much. So I'm very much obviously in support of this. I am voting in favor of this. And I just wanted to voice that support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I agree. I think that some updates are not only necessary but beneficial. I think that it's important for us and the public to know what impact is being made. We've made a substantial investment. This particular council has made investments in addressing the unhoused population that historically the city has not been able to make or made, partly because we've been able to invest ARPA dollars, which are generational dollars. And, you know, we're making that impact. Every month on the public health and safety agenda, we have a standing item for reports in this area. Ordinarily, Tracy Rieger is our presenter. We talk about her successes and what her challenges have been, but it's also important for us to know what works and what doesn't. So we would gladly include that reporting from either Roberto or from Bob Grady with Tracy's reports if they'd like to attend with her. We'll accept those reports anytime.
Thank you. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to echo what everybody else has said, because personally, I think when I've looked at what has happened over this winter and the news media coverage and stuff, I think us as a council, as a public health and safety, you as a mayor have gotten a bad rap because, people are constantly coming up and saying, we haven't done anything, we haven't done anything. We have done leaps and bounds in what we have, from what has been done in the past. We have leaps and bounds yet to achieve. But to sit back and say that we have done nothing and to get beat and to be criticized by the public, I think by having these reports and stuff available to the public, hopefully it'll stop the negative criticism. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, I think we are ready to vote.
You may vote. Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Catholic Charities and Open Door, for being our partner here. Alrighty, next up, we have item number 230308. It's a resolution from the Public Health and Safety Committee supporting the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and energy security. I have a motion by Alder Henke and a second by Alder Watson. Is there any discussion? Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. Just one quick point. I think it's important to recognize, public health and safety recognized right away that while we can control how the city runs its operations, we obviously can't influence how the private sector runs its operations, but I think it's important to model the behaviors that we want to see. And so I think moving this forward indicates that we certainly support and would like to see the private sector endeavor to create similar initiatives and similar goals. I think it's also important, though, that we as a unit of government publicly challenge other units of government to do this with us. We are part of one of the largest county in the state. We are surrounded by neighboring municipalities that have the same operations we have. We all have vehicles and facilities, and we pay for things like lights and heat and gas. And so I think that as we take this step forward as a city to set these goals, and in some cases they're aggressive goals, I think it's important that we also challenge others that are in similar seats and similar positions to join us. So hopefully we'll support this and get it passed. Thanks.
I love a good challenge. Alder Denny.
Thank you, Mayor. I supported this in public health and safety as well, largely on the promise of payback, taxpayer savings, levy reduction. I know this is a little bit aspirational. It's going to be hard to quantify that. It'd be nice to be able to, but if we can, I certainly like to see that. So it's my intention to go with it on that basis, the aspirational aspect, and not to be necessarily a blank check to just there's a lot of gaps in this thing, so I'm taking a little bit of a leap of faith here that we're going to fill this in, fill those gaps in as we go. And one of the first things that needs to be established is that baseline of where we are, so we know where we need to go and what we need to do to get there. So I guess I asked this question in public health and safety, and I don't think we knew exactly when that was going to be, but if we could at least put a date on the calendar, that you could come back and report if that's the end of the year and give us a status of where you are in that process.
I'm seeing some nodding.
Keep us tracking and comfortable that we're doing something.
Okay. Thank you. Alder Lukens.
Thank you. So I first of all want to thank all of the members of the Sustainability Committee committee for all of their hard work on this. And believe me, it's been a lot of hard work from them. And so I really appreciate all that you've done, and the city planning staff for your leadership as well. And the speakers tonight also, thank you for your advocacy. And Alder Denny, thank you for your willingness to take a leap of faith, even if you're uncomfortable. And I hope that's okay for me to speak with or to say that. But because I want to share something, I guess it echoes what Jean Abreu talked about. I spoke with students at school today about this. They're high school students, and I was explaining it a bit and asking them, so what what do you think? You know, because sometimes, like, well, I did speak about it, I think it was yesterday a little bit, and they were like, 2050, like, and anyway, a coworker and I didn't know if they like really cared, or we were kind of like, you know, and so today I said to them, well, what do you think? Because we weren't quite sure what your responses meant. And so Jean Abreu couldn't have said it more eloquently when she talked about hope. And I think by approving this, you know, it's not only what we are doing ourselves to make a difference, but we are giving them hope. Because what I heard from them today, and I tried to get them to come here tonight, but I'm still...
They're always welcome.
Still going to keep trying. But anyway, I heard them say, like, I'm really angry when I care so much about this, and I just feel like people aren't, like, there's nothing we personally can do. We can't make these changes. And another student talked about, so this is nothing against any organization or business, but another student said, you know, I work at the hospital, and I was like so happy to get this job. I thought, I'm really doing something good. I'm working at the hospital. And she said, but you know what? There is like so much plastic thrown in the garbage like every day, and employees, we could recycle it. There's recycling there, but people don't know that. And so for them, I think they really care. They really care, but they need the hope. They need models, and they need to see what other people are doing. So anyway, I'm very proud that of the Sustainability Committee that this is before us, and I guess I just wanted to provide that because I think our role in that and in policymaking is super important, and we can offer hope as well as everything else. So thank you.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is kind of overwhelming. We've got excitement over here and discomfort over here, apparently, but it's all working out well, so that's positive. And, you know, I would say that whenever something is both data-driven and citizen-driven, you likely have a winner, and I think that's what we're seeing here tonight with this, and it was really nice, as it always is when these things happen, to see just a high amount of citizen participation, public input, you know, signatures, and, you know, I think, as it's often said, that real change comes from the ground up, and I think we're seeing that here tonight. But I think on a global issue, as far as city policy and disposition, I think my colleagues have said it very well, that we're trying to set up a framework where we're a role model of the things that we find important. So in a way, we're laying a marker down tonight, and it's drawing some important attention to emissions and so forth. So I think this is something to celebrate tonight, and as we move forward, we must make sure that our recollections are not short or brief, that we remember just what type of policy values we're putting on the table, because we look in Wausau and there are habitual Clean Air Act violations in diverse working class neighborhoods. And even though this relates to the government, it puts that issue on the table, and now we know where the city of Wausau stands, or we should know in a few minutes after this vote. So I look forward to positive, consistent positions with emissions and emissions challenges in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Gisselman.
Yes, thank you. We must realize this is just the first step. I mean, this is the beginning, and this city council and city government has to be aware that as we move forward, I mean, let's not sit here, and I won't be sitting here in 2050, but whoever is sitting here in 2050 looks back and say, well, we didn't quite, you know, so I think we should be looking at this every year and see where we are. So what progress have we made with regard to with solar? We have a solar task force. We should be certainly open to the new advances that we have with regard to clean energy. It's going to cost some money, and by doing this, I think we're saying, yes, this city is going to be committing itself to this for the next quite a few years. So I certainly endorse this, but I see this not as one line in the sand, but hopefully that this is a line that we're going to cross very quickly to establish more lines in the sand so that we can, by 2050, certainly look, and maybe even by 2030, look as a city that is really progressing so that we can say in 2030, yes, and in 20 years, we'll be there. We're halfway there. So I think with Mr. Lynch and all, I think we can be, the committee will be progressing, but I think the city council and the city has to be aware that it's going to cost money, it's going to be different, but I think we're committing to that tonight. We're committing to that future for the city of Wausau. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Lukens.
Thank you. Just one more thing, and that was a perfect intro to it. Alder Gitzelman, I need to invite you, I think, to school to talk with the kids. But that was one other thing, exactly, because when I asked them about their response about 2050, what they said is, yeah, 2050, by 2050, do you know how old we're going to be? We're going to have grandkids. So 2050, so right, what they want is action, like now. And I mean, we know instant gratification, right? But I agree. Hopefully this will be, we will work with this in policies on different committees and ultimately here, and maybe, take, we can benefit from the infrastructure bill to help with some of that. So anyway, I just wanted to add that other comment because I found out they were like, no, not 2050. It needs to happen sooner. So thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I guess just one final comment, and when we talk about, I guess it was inspired when Carol said that the kids would like to see action sooner than later, and I think maybe a small step we can take, obviously we have to develop a plan and some implementation steps. But I think one thing we do every year is we do CIP, we budget. We look at facilities and their needs. We look at a motor pool full of vehicles. We order vehicles, and I think maybe it would be at least a small forward step if, as a result of that process, starting this year with our budget, if we would request that our staff team, when they make CIP requests, look at the possibility or at least price out the feasibility of sustainable options. And so if that means that, and there may not always be a hybrid or an electric equivalent to the equipment that they need or to something that they need, but if there is, how much more is it? That's information that we need. And we may decide to go out on a limb in some of those cases and maybe purchase some of those items. So I think that when that process comes forward, starting in July, that's something that we should try to ask for. And, we may not be able to approve them all, but I think it's information that we've not received in the past. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I saw a light go on and off. I just want to thank the work of the committee. I know they've been working on this for maybe a whole year, maybe more. So thank you for that work. Thank you to the Public Health and Safety Committee. Thanks to the petitioners and everybody that's been emailing and all the kids. I'm so excited. I'm a great aunt, and when I think about my baby nephew will be almost 30 by 2050, it kind of blows my mind. So anyway, thanks for doing this. I feel emotional.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I'll allow that. All right, we are moving on to the part where we are suspending the rules 6B filing and 12A referral of resolutions. This does require a 2/3 vote. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Martins.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11 to 0.
All right, thank you very much. All right, file number 110505. It's a resolution designating April 29th, 2023 as World Migratory Bird Day. It looks like I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. Any discussion?
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11 to 0.
All right, thank you. Now on to file number 070919. It's a resolution approving the city's waiver of first right of refusal to repurchase the property at 400 North 72nd Avenue. This is Pollywood Properties LLC, and consent to lease property from Tempest Wausau LLC to Pollywood Fabrication, Inc. I don't know if we have anything that you want to say about it. Looks like I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Henke. I think we're ready to vote if nobody has any comments or questions.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11 to 0.
All right, thank you. File number 160214. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the alleged claim for recovery of unlawful tax at the Achieve Center, Inc., 520 North 28th Avenue. I know this was discussed at Finance. Looks like we have a motion by Alder Watson, a second by Alder Rasmussen, and Alder Rasmussen, I think you'll give us an update.
Thank you. We discussed this in finance, and so this particular process, these claims for recovery of unlawful tax, are part of a larger process. And so when the Finance Committee gets those, we also get a recommendation from the staff as far as how those should be handled. And so when the Finance Committee and the council disallow those claims, which means we vote them down, that allows for the property owner to pursue added steps in the process. And so the Finance Committee on this item and the next one that's similar unanimously denied those requests. So that option opens up for the property owner, and there was documentation in the finance packet for both items from the assessor as to why those should be disallowed.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, I think we are ready to vote.
You may begin voting. Motion fails 0 to 11.
Alrighty, thank you. Another similar situation, file number 230307. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the alleged claim for recovery of unlawful tax. Roaring Fork LLC, that's 2205 Stewart Avenue. It looks like I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Rasmussen. I don't see anyone.
You may begin voting. Motion fails 0 to 11.
All right, thank you. We are skipping the next item and moving on to item number 230309. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the Fourth Amendment to Advanced Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine SC On-Site Health Services Agreement. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. Any discussion?
You may begin voting. Motion passes 11 to 0.
All right, thank you very much. We are on to our last public comment and suggestions. If there's anybody that didn't get it out earlier, you're welcome. All right, without that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Alder Watson, a second by Alder Henke. All in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.